I'm yet to meet a professional that does not welcome the idea of getting more warm referrals. The only challenge is, how do we do it? Today's guest is one of the foremost referral experts in the country and the world, and he deals directly with financial service professionals, even real estate professionals. I'm thrilled to introduce him to you here in just a minute. Stay tuned, folks. We have a special episode for you today. All right, welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddard. Thrilled to be with you today to bring someone who I have met and I have deep, deep admiration for the past almost 30 years. He's been writing, speaking, training, consulting, both small businesses as well as large corporations, been on some of the biggest stages. His name is Bill Cates. It's a great pleasure to have you with us here today, Bill. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be here. And in case anybody misheard you, it's Bill Cates with a C, not Gates with a G. Bill Gates has a lot of money. I'm going to help you make more money by finding more people to serve. How's that sound?
I love it. I love it. Just in case those that aren't here to see it for themselves. Yes, Bill Cates with a C. You know, I've got 2 of your 6 books in my hands. Beyond Referrals, Radical Relevance. Absolutely enjoyed getting to know your mind. And I thought to myself, boy, we must be brothers from another mother, because the way that we think about referrals is very, very similar. And I'm thrilled to have this audience hear it from someone who's been doing it far longer than I have, really a true expert. Bill, talk to us a little bit about this concept of referrals, right? We have an endless stream of people wanting to solicit or help us to solicit leads, right? Mm-hmm. Leads here, leads there. And that's not what you teach necessarily, right? You teach really how to get referrals. Tell us, why is that? Why have you really taken your career and said, sure, you can go get leads all day long. People will be selling them to you, but I prefer to teach people how to get referrals. Why is that?
Well, mostly it's because it's how most people want to meet you. It doesn't mean that leads can't work from time to time. They kind of work by default, because whoever that person is just hasn't met someone else they feel they can trust through a referral introduction process. So generally speaking, I think we want to orient our business and attract clients the way they'd prefer to meet us. It's their path of least resistance. It's our path of least resistance. And of course, everything gets better when you're working from referrals, higher level of win ratio, and people are more likely to follow your recommendations because their friend followed your recommendations. And in most businesses, and I even think in real estate, if you're not careful, leads can be a recipe to kind of mediocrity in the business. You can sustain perhaps a certain level of success, but it's usually difficult to get to the level that you want just through lead programs. Generally speaking, there's always exceptions, but it's the borrowed trust of a referral that makes things work easier.
Boy, I love that. The borrowed trust of a referral. I'll oftentimes say something similar, is that you can spend weeks, months, years developing trust with somebody, which absolutely can work if you're diligent, or you can simply borrow the trust of somebody else, someone else who already has it. Their endorsement transfers that trust from that professional to you. And in a matter of minutes, in a matter of seconds, you've earned what otherwise may have taken you years.
Yeah. And I would say that it's usually enough to open the door. It's usually enough to get the foot in the door, if you will. Sometimes it's enough to win the new business, to get the listing or to get the buyer. Not always, though. Sometimes that borrowed trust will take you a certain point, and then you have to earn your own trust after that.
Definitely.
That's where my book, Radical Relevance, kind of comes in. It's now that we got the referral, the introduction, how do we talk about our value that's going to truly win the new business? So it depends a little bit on the trust that exists there, and how the credibility of the referral source, and how likely that prospect is going to follow their recommendations. But it definitely gets on someone's radar.
You mentioned this concept of getting that transfer of trust. I'll oftentimes teach people that if you show up like a solicitor, you will get treated like a solicitor, right? It shouldn't be a total disconnect for anybody, right? When someone approaches us soliciting something, the immediate response, the knee-jerk reaction, is defense mode, right? We're being solicited, and you step back. Whereas when someone opens a door for us, when you walk through a different door, it's a totally different experience from day one, right? And as I think you mentioned just a minute ago, is that sometimes it's hard to recover when you're seen through the frame of this is a solicitor, to get them to have full trust and to respect you as a peer mentor leader. That just takes a long time. And so I believe that referrals, part of why probably both you and I really endorse them, is that it actually speeds up the conversion process, right? It lowers the cost of having to spend so much time trying to convince people to trust you.
Oh yeah, it's the most efficient, most cost effective. People spend all this money on marketing, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do some of that and create name awareness for yourself. That can help too, right? Because if you get introduced and they say, "Oh, I think I've heard of her. I've heard of him," that helps. Nothing wrong with that. But the key is getting, I would say, not just referred but introduced. Is these days, while we use the word referrals a lot, I think when you're with a client, you're with a prospect, anyone who has the ability to, the upstream folks that we're going to talk about, I know that's part of your language. It's important that you use the word introductions. Let's talk about how you introduce me to your sister, to your brother, to this person. So we'll get into that as we talk, but it's not just referral, it's introductions.
You talk, Bill, in your book about a right fit client. Real estate agents have a tendency, especially when a market starts to tighten. I would say not just real estate agents, I'm like professionals in general, have a tendency that when a market starts to flatten or even tighten, to get a little scarcity mentality of I need to take any client that I can, right? And cash flow would require that of us to some degree. Yet I think probably you and I would both argue that sometimes when we don't actually know who is our right fit client, we tend to end up actually slowing ourselves down as opposed to speeding ourselves up. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we can, no question. Usually when you get started in any business, they're breathing. You'll talk to them essentially. First of all, you got to practice anyway, and you need the money. That's fine. You don't want to be living off your credit cards for the rest of your life. And eventually, you get to a level of success where there is a right fit, and it could be demographic and it could be psychographic. So from residential real estate, quite often it is the neighborhood, is the geographic area. That's part of it. Sometimes it could be the pricing of the housing, the neighborhoods that you tend to work with. There's demographic and there's psychographic too. People who, they're not shopping for the discounted, real estate agent, if you will. There's so many different options out there. It's kind of confusing. And I wanted to mention, you talked about solicitor. Yeah, you certainly don't want to show up as a solicitor. You want to show up as an educator. If you show up as a teacher and you teach people how to stage their house, to get their house ready to sell, or to think about how they're going to start looking and buying, and you teach them how the business works and maybe what's changed over the last month or year or decade since they were at that game before, then that's usually what wins the business, is because they see you as someone who's knowledgeable. You're there to serve, to help, and they like doing business with you. Just as a quick aside, I'm taking personal fitness classes these days, and the gal that's teaching me, husband, just started a mosquito spraying franchise. Totally different world than what we're in now. But last year he struggled a little bit. I had him buy me dinner, and we just sat down. I coached a little bit, and I said, just show up as a teacher, show up as an educator, show up as this is how mosquitoes live and breathe, and this is how you want to grade your yard, and And he is gangbusters this year. He's already hired 3 other people to do all the spraying. He didn't have to do that anymore, just by shifting from trying to win the business to educate someone on how to be involved in the business with him. And it's made a huge difference. And that's the way we want to go.
Isn't that interesting how simply stepping out of a role of I'm here to get something from you, right? Which is oftentimes how we're taught to market. Like I'm never too busy to get something from you. And we move away from that and we move to a role of here's what I can give you, right? Here's what I know that you need to know. All of a sudden the walls of you're coming at me to get something go down, and people begin to open up and they begin to listen, they begin to trust, right? I love that. good
Yeah,
example.
let me add something to that though, because I'm not saying you don't remove yourself from the attempt if it's a good match
Mhm.
to win the business. You just don't start with that. You don't
Yeah.
show up with that. You don't say, "Hey, I'm here to see if I can, you know, do this for you." You just educate. I'm here to help. I'm here to educate. Now, near the end, at some point, you do have to say, based on all I've learned, based on the things we've discussed, I think that I can do this for you. In other words,
Yeah.
you do want to make a recommendation. You do want to come across with confidence, putting yourself up as that resource to serve them. You need to quote unquote ask for the business.
Yeah.
I like it through a recommendation. I like, here's what I recommend next.
I love
And
that.
so you're still kind of in a teaching mode, but you happen to be in that part of the recommendation.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very similar to dating, right? We would never like show up at the door, meeting somebody for the first time and like going for the kiss. Like talk about getting slapped and like date would be over, right? But after several dates, you've earned the right to maybe do that, right? If you feel like there's a
Yeah,
good recommendation, I don't know if earned is necessarily
earn
the
right.
right or the
Yeah,
right is necessarily the right verb is used, but you get the point, right?
yeah,
Like
yep,
trying to take something too quickly is going to leave you with nothing. Whereas when you give, and you identify that it is a right fit, that's when all of a sudden
yep.
it makes sense for both sides. Let's dive into some of these. Your 17 rules of relevance are absolutely awesome. Absolutely love them. One thing
Thank
that you
you.
say here is the shortest route to relevance is through an introduction from a trusted source, right? We've really talked about that.
Yes.
Um, you talk about give your clients a seat at the table as well. Talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah, whenever you're working on the messaging that you're developing for website, LinkedIn profile, collateral material, however you're going to be talking about your business, maybe revisiting it after a while, talk to some of your clients. Talk, don't just do it in a vacuum. Yeah, you have a pretty good understanding of what you need to say, and you learn a lot from talking to people who, are worked with you or could potentially work with you. So I'll give you some examples. I was doing this with one of my clients, Michael Schmitz, out in San Mateo, California, who has since recently retired. But way back when I was checking in with him, giving him a seat at the table, he says, Bill, when I talk to people about you, I tell them that Bill Cates makes asking for referrals as natural as breathing. And I go, well, that's pretty good. I never would have thought of saying that. And can I quote you? And he says, sure. So I don't just say that I do that because now it sounds like marketing hype. But when I put it into the words of my client who actually said it, then it's true, it's real, and now we're talking about things in the way that our clients think about it. So your clients, your prospects, your centers of influence, they all have a window on your business and what you do that is different than yours. And so you want to bring them in, say, hey, here's what I'm thinking of saying. What is your perception of how I bring value or what makes me different? And you'll learn a lot from these people
I love
in the
that.
process.
Yeah, oftentimes I think we're blind to our own knowledge, right? We kind of speak in jargon. We have our own kind of
Definitely.
industry
Yep.
language, and
Yep.
so we tend to say it thinking other people know what we talk about. Whereas I love your point of like, what caused you to want to work with me? What's been your favorite thing? They use their language, which is probably much more similar to the prospective customers' language that we want to be working with, right? So I love that. What a great concept. Let's talk a little bit about this. The concept that I teach heavily, which is the upstream model, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've validated the fact that, in working for 25 plus years with financial professionals, financial advisors, and others, that they are in conversations with their clients, the good ones, right? They're in
Mm-hmm.
conversations with their clients in a consultative way. They're not just there selling
Right.
products; they're really
Right.
acting as advisors, truly, and consultants. And in the process of consulting and advising their clients, they're identifying the fact that their clients are going to be making changes, moves, things, right? Not just in life, but
Mm-hmm.
in real
Mm-hmm.
estate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because that person, that advisor, has an advisory role already, they are well positioned to give a recommendation at that point. Would you agree with that? Is any other kind of validation you want to add to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone in your upstream, the people you want in your upstream, often called centers of influence, influencers. There's lots of terminology. I like the upstream concept. It is they have awareness of someone who may need your service. And when I work with financial advisors, one of the things I tell them and I say this to real estate agents too, and many real estate agents are quite good at this, is have this inventory of other resources out there that you know, right? Financial advisors, for instance, should know real estate agents, mortgage brokers, bankers, uh, debt consolidators, all kinds of different people tangential to the work that they do, so they can serve their clients or prospective clients, not just through the direct work they do, but to the other introductions. And so, yeah, if you get referred by someone's financial advisor, that's usually a pretty high trust relationship. Accountants, CPAs are usually pretty high trust relationships as well. Attorneys quite often are very high trust relationships between the client and the attorney. A lot of us don't necessarily trust attorneys, but you know what I'm talking about. So whenever it's a high trust relate, that's the borrowed trust phenomenon, right? You're borrowing that trust. And so let me give you an example of a gentleman that I've worked with over the years. Now, he's not a real estate agent. He's a mortgage broker, obviously plays in the world with real estate agents. But he brought me in for 3 different lunches where financial advisors were there at lunch, about 10 each. And I was kind of the value add to that lunch. And I talked to them about how they can get more referrals, introductions, etc. But it was him, the mortgage broker, who was bringing the value to his upstream. And real estate agents could do the same thing. And these advisors, these guys and gals, they were kind of competitors, but kind of not, right? They know that the world's big enough. They don't really care whether they're sitting with another advisor that might be in their area. They usually know each other anyway. So this is how we nurture that upstream, if you will, those relationships. He did it, at 10 at a time over the course of a couple of weeks.
Boy, I love that. I teach kind of the advanced sessions, right? That I teach is, once you identify an upstream partner, right? That upstream partner not only needs value directly from you, but from other of your upstream partners, and putting them together in a room. And I love what you said, right? It's just, you can maximize the amount of value they bring by bringing them all together in one room. It was interesting, Bill, as I did the research, meeting with financial advisors, I found that although many of them would find anywhere between 12 and 24 opportunities to refer a real estate agent in a given year, it was almost unanimous that very infrequently were they actually referring that business to a real estate agent. There was something that real estate agents were doing in the way that they were approaching a financial advisor that was causing that financial advisor to believe that it was more liability in referring them than there was value to their clients. So I'd love, since we're speaking to the real estate industry, why would a financial advisor hesitate to when their client says, yeah, we're looking to sell our primary residence, sell a couple of rentals, consolidate down, buy that vacation home, buy a condo in the city. Like these conversations are happening, right? They're advising with their advisor, yet the advisor is staying quiet on referring an agent. What's the disconnect there?
Well, ultimately they're not referable. So, what causes that? Well, it could be personality, could be coming up too aggressive. I had a real estate agent who I worked with several properties over the years, and I really liked her. She was quite good. However, the only time I ever heard from her was essentially, do you know anyone else I can help? It was like, sending me a birthday card and putting her business cards in a birthday card to me, right? Taking what's meant to be personal correspondence and turning it into, business correspondence. And so it could be personality, could be style. It's possible that the advisor doesn't really know the agent's process, what it would look like. In other words, how would the agent respond? There's a disconnect there. So what an agent needs to do to court any of these upstream partners is to make sure they're super referable from a personality standpoint, from a teaching and a value-added standpoint, from saying thank you and keeping the financial advisor in the loop. That's a very important thing, that you not only say thank you to that referral source, but you keep them in the loop a little bit about what's happening. And inundate them with information. But every now and then you say, hey, this is what's happening. It's moving forward. We're meeting tomorrow, all those kinds of things. And so they trust your process. They trust you. They trust your process by the level of communication you've provided. And that's usually what it takes to become referable, and to maintain that over time, to break bread couple times a year. Just get to know each other on a more personal level from time to time really makes a huge difference.
I love that you said that, mixing personal correspondence with business correspondence. It is interesting when you get something personal from somebody and then at the end they throw in a business. It almost invalidates the fact that, oh, I get why you're coming. I get why you're sending this. You want something from me, right? And although that might not be the intent, it may have been very genuine. We've been trained as an industry to always be asking. And I think, as you identified, there is a proper time to ask, right? When the recommendation is such, and the client's ready, and or the referral giver is in that spot. But if we're
Right.
always using any personal correspondence to our own benefit, as opposed to a genuine reach out and care about the relationship, it does tend to I would say, weaken and even somewhat cheapen some of that conversation. I think that's a brilliant idea, and I love also the fact of really making your client process very visible, right? One thing that, if the advisors that I spoke with, is that they saw it as more of a liability than an asset, right? If I'm going to refer, I'm concerned about what if they don't do a good job, and the way to overcome that, right, is to let them know this is what the process looks like. One thing that I teach is that when agents give a report back, is to say, this would have been kind of the industry standard thing to do, right? Here's why we do that, right? Kind of go a deeper level. And if you vary from what the normal agent would do, be sure and identify that. Say, here's what kind of the average agent would do. We've been trained to do it this way, and here's why. Here's the added benefit to the client, to where there's constantly this, here's average agent, here's what we do. Not in a boastful way, but just in an educational, informative way, so that the client is always aware that there's some forethought, right? It's not just robotic, but it's very intentional and strategic about how they're taking care of their clients.
The why behind any particular thing you may suggest or recommend is very important, because again, that's part of that teaching, right? You're not just saying do this, you're saying do this, here's why. And so now the person feels like every time they're with you, they learn something. And guess what happens? If they learn something they never knew before, or something that was counterintuitive, they tell other people, right? They say, I just learned something from my real estate agents today that was totally took me by surprise, right? They'll tell other people just by that. So yeah, the why behind whatever is always a good thing to think about. Also, if I could say, saying thank you is very important to the referral source. But as important as that is, what's even more important is getting your new client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, to say thank you to the referral source. Because it's one thing for them, the referral source, to hear from you, and they appreciate that. But when they hear from the person that they referred to you, now that really confirms and emphasizes your referability, when that person that they know, whether it's their client or just someone else, now you become super referable because of that.
Yeah, I love that. They can actually see that there's value in continuing to refer you to somebody else, right? One thought I'd love to have, you've really kind of helped us to see, once you get in conversation, educating people about the client process. One thing that I teach is when you're first approaching an advisor, right? When you're first approaching somebody, having some background of understanding as to what their concerns might be, so you can be relevant right away, which is directly what you teach in Radical Relevance, right? Is doing your research up front. Will you help us do some of the research right now? What is it that financial advisors need? What is it that they're looking for? What are some of their breakdowns that a real estate agent might be able to say, you know what? When I reach out to when I get introduced to that advisor, I'm going to be looking to see if this problem is real for them and see how I can solve it. Kind of walk us through the mind of a financial advisor a little bit. What do they struggle with?
Well, I mean, certainly in my world, and the advisors that I end up talking to, for the most part, they're looking for more of the right people to talk to, just like everybody else. In fact, advisors and other folks that come to me say, Bill, just help me get in front of more of the right people. That's what I need, in the most efficient way possible. So certainly being a resource of referrals to them is nice and welcomed, although it doesn't necessarily have to be a reciprocal situation. But any way you can be a resource to them. So that's possible. If you've learned anything else in terms of time management, that's always a big struggle for them, because a lot of financial advisors haven't learned to live a balanced life. I probably true for real estate agents too.
Yeah.
And just people in general. So any tips and tricks you have around saving time, creating more free time, managing one's schedule to have more time for family and hobbies and interests, that's always a good thing. One thing that you always want to do, however you're meeting someone, and by the way, how do you meet financial advisors? Well, you can meet them through other financial advisors. You can meet them through your clients, right? You want to meet your upstream people through referrals and introductions too.
100%.
For the most part, that's the easiest, best way. And so whenever you're meeting someone that way, you get this referral source, this introducer, to give you a heads up about this person, get some demographic information, some psychographic. Tell me a little bit about her personality. Tell me a little bit about what's important to him, his family, all of that. Just learn about their business and about them personally, and then demonstrate that a little bit when you send an email or get on the phone with this person you're trying to develop a relationship. Let them know you've done a little homework and you've learned a little bit. People are flattered about that. People appreciate that. I sometimes have fun and say, if you felt like someone looking over your shoulder yesterday, that was me looking at your website. Have a little fun. If it's in your nature to have some fun, you want to do that as well. So the more you learn about a prospect or the more you learn about a possible upstream partner, the better.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, you're right. And kind of our online forums give us a great kind of looking glass, don't they, through which we can see what's happening in people's lives. And then also what you've identified, which is some of the commonly held struggles that we all face as business professionals: time, balance, right? Even mindset. Is there anything else specific, industry specific? I know some things that I uncovered as I interviewed advisors is this need and desire to want to be at the center of all things financial, right? They really want to know when people are buying and selling real estate. They want to know if they're buying a new $120,000 boat. They're wanting, this is helpful for them to be able to properly advise people, keep them on plan. Would you validate that that's kind of a real, if the agent can help them to really be more valuable to the client so that the client trusts them with more information, gives them more opportunities to consult. Yep. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. And sometimes the real estate agent, let me put it this way. Sometimes, the financial advisor will learn certain things about their clients, but not necessarily everything. Mm-hmm. One of the things I recommend is they make sure they visit with clients in different settings. In other words, sometimes the clients come to them. Sometimes they should go to the client, the home, the office. Every time we meet someone in different settings, we learn more about them. Mm-hmm. And the real estate agent will also be meeting with the clients in different ways and different settings and learn things about them. And now you got to be careful about revealing proprietary information. If you wonder, should I tell George that I've learned this about our common client, then talk to your client. Say, hey, does George know this about you? No, it's okay if I tell him. Yeah, sure, okay, right. So be an intelligence gatherer, if you will, and because money intersects all aspects of one's life, anything you learn about a client, money related or not related, it is ultimately related to money in some way, and the financial advisor should know about that. The biggest risk that any advisor, any upstream person feels by giving referrals is it somehow going to mess up, right? Is it somehow going to damage my relationship with that person? Yeah. And so we've just got to make this whole thing feel as safe and stress-free as possible. And then have that good feedback, get back to that referral source, and then they keep doing it because they know it's a safe thing to do.
Make it as easy as breathing, right, Bill?
As natural as breathing, yes, sir.
I love that. Such great insight. I can't thank you enough for what you've shared. Such a fan of your work. For those that are listening here today, Radical Relevance is just one of his great books that will lead you to others. And I'll put in the show notes a link that Bill shared with me that will give you a toolbox, kind of access to some of the additional helps to help you be radically relevant, really be able to getting referrals as natural as breathing. I love that. So good. I have one more question for you, Bill, that I pose to everybody that crosses the Think Bigger real estate stage, which is this: you're a big thinker. You've been helping other professionals do what they do better for several decades now. What is it that Bill does to continue to grow? What is it that Bill does to continue to expand your possibilities, to continue to to be a big thinker? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit before we got on. I used to be a voracious reader, and right around when COVID hit, I stopped reading as much, and I couldn't tell you why. But now I'm back to listening, so with Audible. So I've become a voracious listener, if you will, and that keeps me going. I also hang around other people who are at my level or even past my level of success in this business. I've done pretty well. So there are fewer of those people, but they're out there. And I've also learned from people who are new in the business that I can learn from anyone. And so I'm a member of the National Speakers Association. Yes, there is an association of professional speakers. You can imagine being a room full of professional speakers. It's not the National Listeners Association, okay? But learning from my colleagues and learning from other business models is a big thing. And I'm a good adapter, and I see what other people are doing, and I kind of adapt and adopt to my own world. So, I'm at a stage in my business where I am beginning to, I can't say slow down because I don't think I'll ever slow down. I definitely won't retire because I got to keep my brain active. I'm a creator and I love to do it. And I am looking to work fewer hours. So now I'm going to my network of people that I know and figuring out how do I still keep a nice, viable business going, producing a nice income, but with very little effort from me. And so this is a kind of a new stage. But when we have these relationships with colleagues and other people out there, and some of people who've done that already, then we can go to them. Whatever problem you encounter in your life, especially your business life and probably personal too, you can best believe there's other people out there that have had the same problem and they've figured out the answer, at least for them, and seek those people out and learn from them. And you'll probably come up with an answer to that problem.
I love it. Seek out mentors and coaches. Awesome. Yep. And Bill, I want to thank you so much again for all that you've shared with us today, for just the impact that you've had upon the professional services industry. For going on again 30 years. It's impressive and super impressive. And I'm sure that the wake of impact that you've had, that you have no idea what that even looks like. Just lots of impact. So thank you for that. Appreciate you trailblazing the way for people like me who want to similarly impact professionals in a really, really big way. I want to thank you again for that. And for everybody tuning in here today, thank you so much for tuning in. My final requests of everybody listening here today are 3 simple words, and they are go think bigger. Bill, thanks for helping us do that today, my friend.